The situation, the meta-political situation of these Davos-like people, these geniuses, these self-appointed benevolent betters who are going to take all our rights and sovereignty and traditions away, and they're going to tell us exactly how to live. They are so brazen in their approach to things, and their vision is so hideous that you are seeing even the Pope speak out against it. And I say this with some surprise, because, or at least recognizing the surprise that many of you might feel when you hear this, because Pope Francis has a reputation of being a little bit more on the liberal side, a little bit confusing in some of his statements, a little bit soft maybe on the Chinese government, a little bit more favorable toward these liberal globalists around the world. That is at least the public perception, and I think that the public has reason to understand those things. But as I have tried to point out time and time again, Pope Francis is not just the communist caricature that you read about in the newspapers. People try to portray Pope Francis as pro-LGBT agenda. They forget that he said, when he was Cardinal of Buenos Aires, that gay marriage, quote unquote, is not merely a political campaign, but rather, quote, a machination of the father of lies who seeks to deceive and confuse the children of God. And when he was asked specifically by the German bishops, but by a lot of the libs within the Catholic Church, to permit blessing ceremonies for gay marriage and that sort of thing, Pope Francis said that the Vatican cannot bless sin. And so he's been very clear. He sounds extremely right-wing and based on an issue such as that. On abortion, some people might suspect, because Pope Francis sounds kind of liberal sometimes, that in our secular world, if you don't understand the history and the inertia and the authority of the church, you might expect Pope Francis to be pro-abortion. He is not. He said that if you go and get an abortion, it's like hiring a hitman. Okay, you can't be any clearer than that. And even on this issue of the big libs, the globalist type people who want to bring us the fourth industrial revolution, as the World Economic Forum calls it, this complete upending of society where artificial intelligence and computers are basically going to run the show, and we're going to cede all of our political rights and traditions to the computers, basically, to technology, under the control of an increasingly globalized elite. Pope Francis says, hey, watch out. There are strict limits here that you cannot pass. A really important statement he just made to the Renaissance conference in Rome. The Renaissance, with the AI capitalized in it, is a Catholic campaign focused on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And Pope Francis said, we are all aware of how artificial intelligence is increasingly present in every aspect of daily life, both personal and social. It affects the way we understand the world and ourselves. It's really important too, because, we're all afraid of being turned into cyborgs, but in many ways, we already are cyborgs. When you are walking around, how often are you not looking at your phone? When you are just walking in your day-to-day life, or at the office, or in school, or wherever, how often do you not have your phone on you? I try to not have my phone on me, and people get angry at me. They say, I just texted you. Why didn't you text me? Because I never text anybody back. Well, I just called you. I said, I don't have my phone on me. What do you mean you didn't? Well, if your phone is always on you and you're always plugged into it, then you are, in a way, sort of a cyborg. And it affects the way that you view even who you are. Pope Francis goes on. He says, innovation in this field means that these tools are increasingly decisive in human activity and even compelling in human decision-making. Now, let's put a pause there. He's saying the technology does not merely facilitate the decisions that you want to make. The technology increasingly pushes you toward the decisions that it wants you to make. That's what social media algorithms are. That's what, when you go shopping on Amazon, that's what Amazon is doing. It's pushing you toward purchasing certain products. The TikTok and the Instagram and the who knows what of it all are pushing you toward consuming certain images, which is pushing you toward cultivating certain desires, which is pushing you even further toward the ends that it has in store for you. And it's not just the computer that has these ends in store, it's the people running the computers. And so rather than just cede our lives away to the people who make the algorithms and run the computers that motivate our decisions, Pope Francis says, I encourage you, ethicists on AI, to continue in your endeavor. I am pleased to know that you also wish to involve the other great world religions and men and women of goodwill so that Algor ethics, ethical reflection on the use of algorithms, will be increasingly present not only in public debate, but also in the development of technical solutions. Put a pause there. This is a really strange statement to come from the Pope, where he says, I'm glad you're involving the other great world religions. Hold on. The claim of the Catholic Church is that the Catholic Church is the divinely instituted church of earth, the spiritual Israel, the bride of Christ on earth, and the Pope is the vicar of Christ. And so this relativistic language of all the other great world religions, we're all accessing the truth, man, and, I grab the truth, and I think that God is like a tree, a big tree trunk. And I think that God is like a fire hose. And I think that God is like a big wall. And actually, it turns out when we all see how we're really thinking of these things someday, we were all touching an elephant. And one person was touching the leg, and one person was touching the trunk, and one person was touching the side. And so we were all the religions are kind of getting at the same thing, man. No one has a monopoly on the truth. That's not a Catholic idea. Okay, the Catholic idea is actually, yes, the church does have a monopoly on religious truth, because God has a monopoly on religious truth, and Christ on earth instituted this church and gave a special role to the apostles and specifically to the successor, to St. Peter and to the successor of St. Peter. So Catholics in particular are going to look at this statement from Pope Francis and say, wait, what's going on here? Come on. And maybe it's because Pope Francis is a big lib or something, but I would prefer to interpret this in a more charitable way, which is, I think Pope Francis is rightly observing that the immediate battle that we have to fight right now against this Leviathan that stands before us, this battle that we have to fight right now against the increasingly technologically powerful atheist, globalist, secular elite, means that the battle lines are not going to be the Catholics versus the Presbyterians. Maybe that's a battle for another day. I don't know. Arm up, you Presbyterians. Someday we'll hash out that battle, but that's not what's going on right now. The battle is not even between the Christians and the Muslims. We've had those battles called the Crusades. Battle's not between the Christians and the Jews. The battle right now is between, it's on a much lower grounding, actually. It's sad that it has to be on this really basic level, but it's between people who recognize that there is a metaphysical reality, that God exists, that the soul exists. The World Economic Forum says the soul doesn't exist. Yuval Harari, who is one of the philosophers of the World Economic Forum, he says, the soul, this is fake news. The resurrection of Jesus Christ, this is fake news. It's not human rights, it's fake news. And so the battle here is, if you want to get anything done, we need supporters here. And so the battle is between people who recognize God exists, humans are made in the image of God, and we're not just stuff and matter to be dragged along by a computer and an algorithm. That's how I'm choosing to interpret that. And I think if that is the correct interpretation, it certainly, if that is what Pope Francis had in mind, or whether it isn't what Pope Francis had in mind, it certainly is true of the situation nevertheless. He goes on, he says, indeed, every person must be able to enjoy a human and supportive development without anyone being excluded. We must therefore be vigilant and work to ensure that the discriminatory use of these instruments does not take root at the expense of the most fragile and excluded. Let us always remember that the way we treat the last and least of our brothers and sisters speaks of the value we place upon human life. We could take the example of asylum seekers. We could take the example of all of the marginalized people who are fragile and excluded. Let us remember that it is not acceptable that the decision about someone's life and future be entrusted to an algorithm. And this is really important. You are seeing here that the real line in the sand is humans must remain the stewards of creation. We can't just delegate that away. Like the Congress delegated away so many of its powers to the alphabet agencies in the executive branch. We cannot just delegate away our stewardship of the creation to a computer. We cannot establish the domination of technology over the origin and destiny of human life. This is one of the strong arguments against in vitro fertilization. where increasingly you're hearing really messed up stories. There's one I wanted to get to today. We don't have time to do it, about the actress Anna Kendrick, who was lamenting her breakup. She said, I've had this boyfriend and we made embryos together and then we broke up. Okay, well, it means you had children together. You got souls on ice over there and you say, no, I no longer care about my children. Let them freeze forever, or let them be destroyed, or let them die, or whatever. One of the arguments against things like in vitro fertilization, there are many arguments, but one of which is it establishes the domination of technology over the origin and destiny of human life. It disrespects our own humanity and we as people who are made in the image and likeness of God. That is a huge threat. There is always a political battle between policies that will degrade human beings or policies that will recognize the dignity of human beings. What's happening right now, because of the means and opportunity afforded by technological advancement and globalization, we are at the precipice of a major battle, and it's not a battle over tax cuts. It's a battle over who controls us. It's a battle over what controls us. It's a battle over what will human beings even be going into the future. You've got to become a member at Daily Wire. So head on over, dailywire.com/Knowles. Use code Knowles at checkout. Get 2 months free on all annual plans. We will see you at the member block.